Welcome to another episode of the Boring AppSec podcast. Today we're chatting with Dustin Lehr, the co-founder of Catalyst. Before founding Catalyst, Dustin has played many roles including developer, AppSec engineer, and chief security officer. Now, security culture is a term our industry throws around a lot. Um, Many of us mean very different things about it, but I can tell you that Dustin's one of the few folks I've met who has actually thought deeply about the subject. In this episode, we speak about everything from Security Champions program to understanding the psychology of security teams and much, much more. This was definitely one of my favorite conversations of the season. Listen in. So, Dustin, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. Dustin, do you want to tell us a little bit about what Catalyst does? And then we'll use that as a segue to talk more about Security Champions.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you mentioned, I spent over a decade actually as a software engineer. And then I got into application security as an AppSec leader. I found pretty quickly that it's very important to connect with people at your organization. And one of the ways that I found to do that is as you're finding allies and people who are supporting the changes that you're trying to make, start to bring them in and create essentially a community that's centered around education and learning more about security. And then ultimately sort of culture change, like encouraging those folks to reach out to others on their team, others within the organization. So I got really into Security Champions, I think in general, just based on that experience. And then I built a company sort of on the side, bootstrapped about 3.5 years ago, Catalyst, really to bring this concept into more, to support this concept and to support the industry in building security champions in general. So that's really what Catalyst is all about. We have services, so we're sort of a full stop, everything you need to succeed when it comes to security champion programs. We help design them. We help run community meetings. We help with engagement. And we also have a product that we're building that helps with the reinforcement of actions, because I think it's extremely important not just to learn stuff, but to also go out there and actually do stuff. So we want to encourage doing those things through our platform as well.
Got it. Hey, Dustin, thank you so much for that introduction. That makes a lot of sense. So when it comes to security champions, the way I like to believe or think of it is it's mostly culture-based sort of influence, right? And I believe in the saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. That is something I've heard from multiple leaders say that. So I'm just kind of curious because in my experience in all the companies I've worked at, I haven't seen the Security Champions program, well, A, implemented in all the places, and then B, even if they implemented this, success of that program kind of really depends on company to company, teams to team. So just kind of curious to get your thoughts on what is it actually about the Security Champions program that, you so now have a company around that. Yeah, if you can share some of your thoughts and experiences around that, that would be really awesome.
Yeah, and I think results may vary, like you said, in terms of security champion programs. We have felt like we have tapped into some of the secrets to make security champion programs work, which is why we wanted to build a company around it, because I think there's a lot more that we can do in terms of awareness and helping people understand what works, what doesn't, what are some of the blunders or gotchas that you should avoid, what are some of the best practices, essentially. And I think putting our sort of stake in the ground, getting ourselves on the map in terms of, hey, champion programs can work, and there's plenty of cases out there that are even published. Cases like AWS has a really nice published article and so forth. These programs can work if they're done right. And we really just wanted to bring more awareness into how to do them right, what are some pitfalls to avoid, and so forth. So now, happy to talk about some details in terms of pitfalls and all of that too, if we want to get into that level of detail, but at least that's a good start for us today.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? At least in my experience, when I was a consultant at Digital, kind of trying to help customers build a security champions program, as well as when I was at Razorpay, when I was the head of security. So I built a security champions program myself, with our business units. One of the things I noticed very often is that the security champions program almost needs a champion to build it, right? So there's usually like one person in the AppSec team. That was me, by the way, at Razorway. But in different companies, there are different people, right? There's a champion who kind of starts it, and then they're able to knock it off with a lot of enthusiasm. Usually the first business unit or the app team that comes on board is also very enthusiastic about it, probably someone who finds security interesting. But then 2-3 quarters down the line, things start to fizzle out a little bit. And especially after this security champion, for lack of a better phrase, leaves the company or this churn, the program absolutely fades out, right? This is a trend I've seen in multiple places. And it does some good in the first few quarters, but I guess my question is, and you kind of spoke about this a little bit, is how do you make this sticky, right? And can technology sort of help here? Because to take a slight detour, I run a security design review company, which is kind of largely in the realm of threat modeling, right? And I get the same questions all the time. Isn't threat modeling about culture? Is it always about what people do? Can you really have tools do threat modeling and stuff like that, right? I have an answer for threat modeling, which we'll keep for another day. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how technology can help Security Champions program and how to make it sticky in general.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of technology, but also having an ally out there that's going to help you sort of bridge, the resource challenges as well, which is why we wanted to sort of come on the map and say, regardless of if this person who's the champion of your program leaves, we're there at least. And I think that's part of the attraction of having a vendor like us working with you consistently. And we take a very white glove approach too. I think every program's different, so we try to customize and tailor and just be there all along the way in terms of people's journeys. But I love some of the other questions that you had, so I think that we should definitely dive into more details here. So first of all, I do think that you do need a champion, someone who's excited about the program. But I also think that your leadership, like on the security side, and ideally other leaders in the company, should also be excited about this program. There's a little bit of a, you sort of determine your own fate if you're skeptical a little bit. Like if you've got a security leader who's like, I don't know that I believe in this, so they don't back it up. They don't talk to other people. They don't get excited about it. Other people pick that up. So it's a little bit of like if you want to make it work, you have to believe that it's going to work in a lot of cases. And I've run into a lot of situations where CISO's skeptical or whatever, and then the program thus isn't as successful because the security leader doesn't even believe in it, right? So you have to kind of keep that momentum and that snowball going when it comes to engagement and excitement. Now, in terms of after a few quarters it fizzles, I think this is where we start to get into some of the behavioral science side, why humans act the way they do. And think about it in terms of curiosity, a very fleeting sort of initial, hey, I'm curious, what is this thing? I've never seen this before. So you get initial response. You get a few people that show up, and then a few quarters goes by and they're like, okay, now I know what that's all about. I'm not curious about it anymore. That initial curiosity dies off. So they need other motivators to keep them going. Now, what are those other motivators? A lot more depth than just curiosity, I would say. Things like actually providing value back to the champions and back to the rest of the organization, intrinsic value. So I'll give you an example. Maybe you've got a monthly brown bag or a lunch and learn, which is a typical component of these types of programs, like a community meeting where everyone gets together. People are initially curious about that, but if you don't deliver the goods, if you don't give them material and information that's interesting and relevant to what they do, eventually they're going to be like, well, I tried, but it really wasn't for me, right? So engagement will drop off. So really focusing on really good content and then switching things up, keeping it interesting. I think those are some of the initial things to really think about in terms of creating a program that lasts.
Yeah. No, I think that kind of makes a lot of sense. And as you were saying that, I can kind of do a flashback to all the mistakes I made when I ran the program. But you're absolutely right? You got to keep it fresh. You got to keep it engaging. And that's kind of true probably about running any community. And but it definitely works for security champions as well. The one other question that I get often when I talk about security champions to leaders is, how do you measure if a security champions program is working, right? So one thing is, hey, are folks showing up to your monthly meetups? Those are kind of like input metrics. And a lot of management type folks, nothing wrong with that, like output metrics, and kind of want to think about saying, hey, what does this mean for security outcomes, etc. Now, in general, measuring ROI in security is hard, right? I'm guessing it's even harder for like a people-based initiative like this. So kind of how do you kind of, what do you recommend to your customers are ways to know if your program is actually working, if it needs intervention, or just keep going with what you're doing?
Yeah, and I typically talk about this in terms of certainly the people element is hard to measure. And I think what makes this hard is people's behavior you can't directly connect to the efforts that you're doing with your security champion program. Okay, so you do some trainings, you have these brown bags and lunch and learns and people are participating, but how does that actually directly cause a reduction in risk? You actually can't really show that directly. Okay, so this is the age-old correlation versus causation concepts. But you can show correlation, okay? You can actually show, and I typically talk about this in terms of two different ways to do this. You can show a before and after state, okay? If you start measuring certain metrics like your risk, I don't know, number of risk register items that are critical, high, whatever you want to do there, number of vulnerabilities, number of new vulnerabilities introduced, where in the process they're introduced. One of my favorite metrics is actually how often do people reach out to the security team to bring them into things, which you can measure via like Jira tickets as an example. Like where are the Jira tickets that people create a Jira ticket and then they bring in a security member, right? That shows a very, very strong relationship and value add that the security team has because you're actually being invited into conversations. That's huge. How many people have experienced where people ignore you or don't bring you in or actively avoid bringing you in, right? That would be the opposite of something good. Anyway, back to before and after state. How often are people doing that, bringing you into conversations before a champion program and then after? And then also think about things in terms of like A/B groups and A/B testing too. Like, are the teams that have security champions doing more things in terms of bringing people in terms of reducing risk, reducing vulnerabilities? Do they catch issues earlier? Are they actually doing these design reviews like you mentioned before? I think all of that can be strongly correlated. There's a concept in correlation where you can say this is a strong correlation versus a weak correlation. If you can show that it's a strong correlation back to this champion variable, then you can make a pretty strong case to leadership when it comes to metrics for this type of program.
No, I think you make a great point, right? One of the things I also feel this does, like as you were saying this, is that the empathy between app teams and security teams dramatically go up when there's a security champion program in place. So like exactly like you said, right? So when we kicked off a security champions program with one business unit, we couldn't scale it to every business unit initially, but you could see that there was a lot more empathy on both sides, right? Even the security folks, like, hey, developers have a lot more to do than just security, so their empathy went up as well. And as we expanded, security kind of became a first-class citizen without being a blocker, right? And I don't know what's the best way to measure that, but I guess something like how much time does it take for a developer to respond to a security person reaching out to them, right? Like a bug bounty report is submitted was something that we could see a positive correlation between teams which run a champions program and which don't, right? So yeah, I think a lot of what you said make complete sense and definitely worth tracking.
Yeah, and like I was saying, having people bring you into things is a really good indicator because they know about you, they trust you. Clearly, you're providing them value if they keep inviting you back, right? So that's, again, one of my favorite metrics.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question to that. So I think you said something that kind of makes a lot of sense to me is you need to have a CISO or, some leader in your company sort of excited about a security champions program if you make sure that it is being run successfully, right? So I guess the question is, how do you even get leaders excited about something like a security champions program? Do you speak about the metrics and do you like sort of compare like, look, this is what you have, this is what we can promise you with a security champions program? Like, how do you go about that?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to a little bit of what we were talking about before, that these types of programs reduce friction. They create empathy, right? They create smoother relationships between like the development org and the security organization. And I think, especially talking to senior leaders who have experienced that friction, they're going to get it. They're going to get, okay, well, yeah, I think we do need to establish relationships with other people. What does this look like in terms of getting people excited about security? If you can sort of convince them about positive reinforcement and motivation and all that stuff, I think you can sort of paint this picture and vision of, everyone sort of getting along, right? In terms of having better relationships between this org and others. I do think, though, so there's this fantastic article about CISO tribes. I don't know if you've seen this before. Maybe that's worth sharing a link as far as this podcast goes. But there are different approaches, I think, to security in general. If you're sort of a compliance checkbox person, I don't think you're going to be thinking about relationships, culture, or that sort of stuff. If you're just purely sort of tech-based, you're not going to be thinking in this way. I would argue you're missing out, okay? I would argue that those CISOs are missing out in terms of a better environment, a better culture that they could be creating within their companies. But if they're not there, like I haven't found a whole lot of time efficiency around trying to convince people that really just don't get this. You know what I mean? I think it's a lot more of like, very much like security champions, let's find allies who are out there who understand the importance of culture and work with them to help hopefully influence others in the industry as well. So again, I don't spend a lot of time I talk to a lot of CISOs. If a CISO comes to me and they're like, whatever, we already have tech, we don't need this nonsense. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, I'm just going to skip right over you, good luck. And then I'm going to go work with someone who really gets it and really is trying to make a difference at their company.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Speaking about kind of CISOs and culture, so you mentioned something about behavioral science. Now, this is a term that I don't really understand well, but I'm curious to know, have you actually studied this while you were building the company? What did you find out about behavioral science that sort of applies to the security industry at large? If you have any insights to share there.
Oh boy, a ton. Yeah, I went way down this path. And I think this came from my experience when I started to try to reach people across the organizations I was working for and influence people and build security champions. I started getting into some challenges, why aren't people engaging? How come no one's responding to me, right? That sort of stuff. So I was like, why? I think it all starts with that question. Why are people behaving this way? And then for me, it was this rabbit hole of like, well, how do people work? Let me go back to like my college psychology class. And I've actually got my college psychology book right here that I read consistently. So I've studied this for years at this point. I don't have a degree at this point, but I've spent so many hours learning about psychology and gamification and these other fields of behavioral science. And it has helped tremendously. And even our company, Octalysis, we actually have built this company around these concepts. Like I mentioned before, there are certain things that work in terms of engagement. There are certain things that don't work. To understand those things, I think, is to understand people and to understand the science behind people. And this is something else I talk about all the time too. For us tech people, like nerd people like me, I need to know there's a science behind it, and there is. Okay, so, you hear this a lot, like people are the biggest problem in cybersecurity, and then that's almost ignored. It's almost like, okay, well, that sucks. Let's just focus on AI and tech and these other things that are easy to understand. Okay, however, there is a science behind the people side. And the more you sort of learn about that, not only are you going to have better success engaging with people, but you're also going to have, I would argue, better success in your career too, because now you know those little things about how humans work. So yeah, I've gone way down that path, and I am just absolutely fascinated with that entire field.
Yeah, very nice. That's awesome to hear. One other question before we sort of continue on is, so do you consider that, as part of a security champions program, security training is also a big element of it? Because Again, security training is also something, I've worked in multiple companies and I've seen some places where it works really well because the training is relevant to the programming language that the company uses. And then in other places, I've also seen where the training is very high level, right? Like they don't go into the details, they don't actually train the engineers. So, in your experience, Dustin, do you find that if you sort of accompany a security champions program with the relevant training for an organization, that is much better and has better outcomes as compared to the other approach?
Absolutely. I think you said it. So the way that I like to think about this is as you are connecting with folks and building relationships, that's sort of the foundation. You need to move into education pretty quickly, because like I said before, people are curious. You're like, hey, we've got, I don't know, this gamified thing with our champion program. But if they're not actually like learning something that they're going to be able to take forward and increase and sort of enhance the way that they work and be better. Like, I think this is where, people are, especially engineering minds, are always trying to develop their skills. They're trying to find the things that are going to differentiate themselves and sort of grow in the way that they are learning how to code and all that stuff. Learning cybersecurity is a great way to do that. So I do think that training is essential. I will say a couple other things, and that's training is very similar to what I was talking about before in terms of correlation. It's difficult to draw a direct causation between, hey, I took a training and therefore I didn't code a vulnerability. Like I was about to code a vulnerability, but then I remembered my training and I didn't. How do you prove that happened? It's very difficult. So you kind of have to go into more of the correlation. The people that take extra training, as an example, beyond just compliance, their teams are better in this way. Like, you have to sort of show that strong correlation between them. The other thing that I would mention is that training is a little bit more of a left side activity. Like, if we talk about SDLC, and I do think you need to make a case for right side activities to justify left side, meaning this. How do you make the case for training and design reviews and all these left side activities? You have to show that there are vulnerabilities in production that can be and will be prevented by having these proactive sort of preventative measures in place. So I do think you need to sort of start with the right side, measure that, get control over that, and then you can start to justify more training in more of those left side activities.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I kind of want to double click on something you said on gamification, right? I think especially in training in security champions, these two areas, we use the word gamification very often to make it more interesting for people, to give them kind of a ladder to climb on, etc. But sometimes I kind of feel like we overdo it, and sometimes you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes, kind of a thing, right? Are there some thoughts or some frameworks to think about on what kind of gamification is good and where do you draw the line? Like, I remember doing a secure code training, which is about enemies attacking the home front and all that. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, this is nothing. This neither piques my interest, nor does it actually help me in any way, right? So what part of gamification makes sense, and where do you kind of draw the line on what's too much?
Yeah. Okay. This is where I've studied a lot. So let me just drop a book that was gold for me to learn this stuff. It's called Actionable Gamification, and it's by Yukai Chao. And we can put a link maybe in the podcast to that as well. And that completely changed my mindset when it comes to gamification. So let me pull a few concepts out and we can talk about this in more depth. First of all, I think gamification is a bit misunderstood. I think that people think, oh, you're turning it into a game, right? And then some of the ideas of like, well, we don't play games here. Like, this is a very serious environment or whatever. Okay, that's fair. That's not what gamification is. Gamification is not necessarily turning something into a game. Okay, gamification is taking motivational elements that work in games and using them in a non-game situation. Okay, the focus is actually on non-games. So what this comes down to is understanding what motivates humans and then creating a design and an experience that's going to effectively motivate them and engage them. Okay. So as an example, very simple example, when you get promoted, okay, let's think about this. You get promoted, okay, you get a little bit more salary. That's nice. Is that really the benefit? You just get more money? Is that really what's attractive about getting a promotion? No. You know what's attractive? The recognition, the increase in responsibility, the title change, the status change, okay? That's a leveling system, okay? So I don't know if both of you play games. We should talk about this a little bit, but sometimes you'll have characters as you play games, and as you do more things, you're getting more experience, you're leveling up, right? And when you increase that level, you're now able to do more things, and you have boosters, and you have things that make you more powerful, and you're able to do more things. That's the exact same thing, okay? So we have been doing gamification in terms of hierarchies and the way that we build companies and these sort of paths in your career all along the way. That's gamification, okay? So now, I do think gamification can be overused, abused, and so forth if it's done at a very surface level that doesn't take into account the actual motivators of people. And this book that I mentioned is all based around this framework called Octalysis. And this framework essentially defines 8 different core drives. These are drives, these are motivators that all humans have. And it's all centered around understanding those 8 core drives so that you can actually design an experience that's going to appeal to your motivators. So that's the type of deep gamification that I believe in. That's the kind of deep gamification that we do at Catalyst as well.
So if I'm hearing you right, you actually do this analysis for each of your customers to understand. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. How do you spell it? Is it OK Octa analysis?
OC like octagon.
Okay, got it.
So OCTALYSIS, Octalysis.
Got it.
Yeah, it's
interesting you
awesome.
said this because I don't know how much of the Japanese Buddhist culture is into this, but a lot of the Japanese teachings are about 8-fold paths or 8 core principles. So now I'm really, really interested about this book. Now I've got to put this on my reading list. But that was fascinating, right? Again, I think a lot of gamification becomes about games, but it's actually about game theory, which I guess is different from kind of just like playing games. But what you said makes complete sense.
Yeah, related though,
Yeah.
because game theory is based on human behavior as well, right? Like the prisoner dilemma as a really good example of that, right? How do you behave in that particular situation is based on the drivers, the motivators of humans ultimately. And we can, I could talk more about Octalysis. I think that what I love about it as well is the drives are very intuitive. There's things like meaning as a drive. Like we do things because we want to find meaning within those things, or we just want to accomplish something, or there is a creativity involved, right? Or there's ownership. There's sort of extreme ownership over something. So we want to protect that thing. Social influence, other people, what other people think of us. And then there are some interesting other motivators that I think are fascinating. We talked about curiosity. That's one of them. Okay. It's curiosity and unpredictability as a way to motivate us. Scarcity, we want what we don't have, right? Again, very intuitive. And then loss and avoidance, we don't like the idea of loss. So I actually just listed all 8 of them. And there's a lot of depth behind that too. And I think there's even specific techniques that you can use that are all spelled out in that book. So again, that was sort of a really good entry point for me to go down this path of behavioral science and then start to learn the reasons why we're motivated by meaning and calling and all the things that I just mentioned. So it's a fascinating world.
Yeah, no, it is fascinating. I mean, the fact that I've been in this industry for almost 15 years, and I think like Sandesh has been around the same time, and I haven't heard anybody speak about security culture and gamification, like using Octalysis and things like that. That's pretty fascinating. makes me want to look into this a little bit more. So as I know I think we're doing good on time. So I have a couple of questions before we can move on. Um, so in organizations, right, where the culture is such that security teams are generally considered as people who block or the blockers, right? How do you even initiate a program like a security champions program in such an organization where there's so much friction already? How do you get through that first layer in order to actually make meaningful impact?
Oh, there's so much there. I think at least you should start small, like start to connect with people, start to build relationships to the point that maybe you surprise them. And I think this is very, very common because I think people have preconceived notions about what security is like. As an example, I'll come fresh into an org. I don't know anyone yet. I start reaching out to people and setting up meetings and meet and greets and that sort of stuff. And some of them are like, am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong? Why is the security team calling me right now? Right? So that's a preconceived notion that they have about security, or they've maybe been burned. They have PTSD with working with security teams in the past, right? They have been blocked and they've had that relationship where the security teams in their ivory tower just telling people what to do and so forth. And I will say this, part of why I joined cybersecurity as an industry is not because I was like, wow, cybersecurity is doing cool things. I was like, I've been burned by these teams over and over in my career as a developer. I joined the industry to help fix this issue, and build stronger relationships and provide value and be very solution oriented as well. I think that's really the key, right? So start small, reach out to people, show them that you're not like the others or like other people that may have approached them in the past. And then do more with like branding. Like there's a lot you can do at a macro level too, in terms of, getting the message out. Hey, we're a team that's going to help you. Here's how we help. Here's how you contact us. We will not shame you for sharing a security concern that you see on your team. Like, getting those messages communicated at a broad organizational level, I think also has an effect. And then this is kind of where the whole gamification and motivational pieces fit in too, because, are you creating content? Are you creating stuff that's cool and exciting for people to go, oh, that's different. I haven't seen that before. This is a different type of security team than I've ever worked with. So there's a lot of different things that you can do there to change the perception.
Yeah, so I guess it all boils down to the kind of personal relationships you build with other teams, and yeah, got it. Okay, awesome. Sandesh, do you want to skip to the next section just because we are short on time?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had a question for Dustin, which kind of likely ties into the next section. So we'll go there. Okay. So Dustin, one of the things that happened to me is that I kind of studied economics very late in life. Maybe around the time I was like 28, 29, pretty late, right? But as I studied economics a little bit for like a side project that I was building, I kind of felt like I understood cybersecurity a lot more. Like just the power of incentives, behavioral economics, and all those concepts kind of made a big difference, right? So, I mean, do you think the fact that you started out as nothing to do with security as a graphic designer and then kind of moved your ranks, do you think that kind of gives you like a unique insight into what you do? I'm guessing the answer is yes, but I guess the more interesting question is how so, right? Because some of the things you said today have definitely surprised Anshuman and me. So I'm trying to understand kind of where that a different way of looking at things come from.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like nature versus nurture, which is certainly this behavioral science concept in psychology found a lot too. I think it's partly nature and partly nurture. I tend to think 50-50 when it comes to nature versus nurture. I think part of this is my nature. I think I'm for some reason that was predetermined. I am attracted to certain things. Like you mentioned, I did spend a couple years as a graphic designer. So I've got a bit of a creative side, right? I play guitar. You can see my guitar there. So there's this attraction that I've always had to maybe thinking about things more creatively, more, differently and so forth. But I also think that, just a quick note, that I think a lot of technical people fall into this realm as well. Like I've met a lot of developers and so forth that They like music. They like being creative. They like that other outlet. So it's certainly not beyond the realm of what I think a lot of people can get into more and be fascinated by. I think it's a matter of leaning into it a little bit. Like, well, I'm at work and I just do technical stuff, and then I go home and then I do creative stuff and have fun and that sort of stuff. It's like, but how can we bring these together? Like, do you want to have fun at work? Or have you given up, wanting to have fun at work? Why? Why not bring that creativity in and that fun and all that stuff into your work? I think the other thing that's interesting about cybersecurity in general is that we need help from like everyone, like having more people that have knowledge about marketing and community engagement and culture and all of that stuff, I think is very important to cybersecurity in general, not just the technical stuff. We need to reach people, we need to influence people to have better behavior. So yeah, that's the nature side. I also think nurture. I think that in a large portion, I've gone through my career sort of learning certain things in terms of what does work, what doesn't work. Like, how do you negotiate best for your salary? Okay. This is a psychological thing. Okay. So to learn that stuff over time, I do think, for me at least, it's reinforced the importance of learning people, right? And I think, again, leaning into that, okay, you're a developer, great. You still got to negotiate your salary. You want to know how to do that? Do you like getting paid a little bit more for the work that you do or not? If you do, you might want to start to learn this stuff. One other note is I was very heads down as a developer for many years. I did not talk to anyone. There was this, we could probably all relate to this, right? There's this element of like, leave me alone. Do you want me to work or do you want to talk? Okay, I'm troubleshooting this issue. You keep asking for status every hour. It's like, do you want me to fix the issue? Or do you want me to give you status? Like, can you pick one? So I had a very hardcore approach when it came to engineering. And I think over the course of my career, I learned to balance that with the people side, the influence side, and so forth.
No, that's a great answer. So while you were saying, one of the things I was thinking about is that, you kind of built communities in the past, right? You also have like a meetup and a website which talks about security champions as well, aside from your company. And one of the things I like to ask founders, because I kind of, especially since I started thinking about starting up and I started up, I'm always interested to understand what motivated you to start up. Because a lot of what you said, I'm sure you were doing all of this as the head of AppSec and the deputy CISO. You were doing all this when you were running meetups. Why did you have to start a company to do this? Why did you have to go through the torture of starting a company to kind of do this, right? So I'm curious about what got you into actually starting up as opposed to just doing this as a part of your job.
Oh, this is such a great question. We talked about a motivator being meaning. Epic meaning and calling is the official motivator. I think that a lot of startup founders, and maybe you can share some of your experiences here too, but for me, this was very much an opportunity to take what I found that worked and help other people. Like this is not, how do I make millions of dollars overnight? No, not at all for me. This is, how can I help as many people as possible with this? Now, I could keep it to myself. I could be like, yeah, I'm an AppSec leader. I know all these secrets. When you hire me, I'm gonna kill it. You're gonna have an amazing champion program. You're gonna have a better culture and so forth. Okay. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to bring those concepts to the industry in general to help as many people as possible. So that's why I'm doing it.
No, I think that's a great point. Kind of resonates a lot with kind of what you said as well, is that at least for me, the point was that if you really care about impact, right, you kind of start thinking about, do you want to deeply impact one company or do you want to impact a little bit for a lot of people? And if it's the latter, then you're probably better off being a startup founder. And for anybody who's thinking about being a startup founder to make $1 million or millions of dollars, the odds of doing that are so low, right, that you only hear the successful stories. So that's probably, you're probably better off being a career practitioner to make a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, founders make a lot of money too, but the odds are pretty low, right? It's a lot of all or nothing kind of a deal there. But I think that was for me, right? I mean, do I deeply impact one company or do I impact a lot of people, a lot of companies a little bit? And I kind of felt like if what I enjoyed was the latter, so I kind of felt like I needed to be in the business of security. And if you also enjoyed building, whether it's a team or a company or a product, then I felt like being a startup founder was probably a better bet. So I kind of resonate with what you said there.
Yeah, that's a noble effort. And I think that, I think there's some misconceptions there too. Like, practitioners will be approached by vendors and they're just like, oh, another vendor, leave me alone. You're just trying to make money off of me. It's like, no. And being on the other side and being a vendor, it's like, I'm just trying to help. Like, if you don't want my help, okay, that's fine. But I'm just trying to help. I found a few things that I think work. I think I can provide you value. So let's work together. And that's what it is that's what it is. I think at that core, it's about helping other people.
Yeah, no, like in today's world and age, right, where there's like a sea of cybersecurity vendors who are, I don't know, I can't speak for themselves, but it's very refreshing to hear somebody say that, you're actually wanting to help people and inspire others just because of your experiences. Because this is also an area that I've tried to think about quite a bit recently is, how like I've learned so much throughout my career. And I think that is also one of the reasons why we started this in the first place. Like both Sandesh and I, we both wanted to, share whatever we've learned so far. So yeah, it's very refreshing to see that you're approaching it, from the purpose, like this is something you enjoy doing. This is something that brings you joy and happiness. So why not? So yeah, totally on board. Justin, we can't let you go before we ask you about AI. So yeah, like what has your experience been like? Have you been experimenting with AI? If so, how are you thinking about incorporating AI into what you're doing? Anything that you want to share around those lines?
Certainly. Yeah, let's definitely talk about AI. I think that our sci-fi dreams are coming true is not necessarily the case right now. I think people see AI and they think about the movies that they've seen, all that stuff. We're not there yet. And all of my experimenting with AI and so forth has just reinforced that fact. Now, does that mean there's no value? Yeah, there's a ton of value. And we've seen value with ChatGPT and some of the incorporation of AI into different tools and so forth. I think there's a ton of value there. I just don't think it can, it's everything we want it to be yet. There's a lot of progress that we need to make, I think, until it gets to that point. It can certainly regurgitate. And I think there's value in that. Like imagine the Copilot, or I always like the example of Clippy from the old Word documents, hey, it looks like you're trying to fix a vulnerability. How can I help? Here's some resources and so forth. I think that's valuable, and having it on demand and right there and just in time, you're about to make a mistake. It highlights that and says, you might want to make this a prepared statement, right? Something like that, I think is really valuable. But it's not going to be able to bring the level of creativity and so forth that a human has right now. We might get there at some point. Now, in terms of incorporation into the stuff that I'm doing, I do think observing patterns of behavior and pointing those out to some degree to help with engagement, or at least to help with the administrators of a champion program know where things have changed, are different, anomalies, that sort of stuff, I think is really valuable. But I also think that humans want to connect with other humans too. So if you're thinking, well, I'll just have a bot as the interface between my security team and the devs, I don't think that's going to work. And I think no matter how advanced AI gets, if people think that they're interacting with a bot instead of a person, that's not going to be as attractive to folks. So even though this might seem like a shortcut and we can maybe not have to talk to people so much anymore, I don't think that's going to work. And I don't think that's going to be as effective.
Got it. Do you find that maybe there are opportunities to augment these relationships between humans, or do you just still feel like introducing anything that is not a human between two humans will only create more problems?
I mean, I think it'll help. So I'm thinking about how to engage with your champion community. Maybe you've got a Slack channel. Let's just take a specific case. Let's say you set up a bot that's going to automatically find an article in the world and post it to people. Are people going to react to that as well as if somebody took the time to find something, share why it was relevant to them, and post that? Right? Definitely the latter in my view. And I had a post on LinkedIn recently that said, hey, think about your news feed in LinkedIn. Okay. What if that was all AI generated content? Would that be as attractive to you versus actual real people posting actual things that are affecting them in their lives so that you can connect with other people, right? Again, the latter, that's very obvious to me. And I think that's going to be true well into the future as well, no matter how cool AI gets. So I do think AI helps with that. Hey, help me find a couple of cool articles that might interest me. Since you know me, AI, and you know the things that I like, help me find a few things. Okay, thanks. I'm going to read them. I'm going to read them. AI can't read them for me. I'm going to read them. I'm going to understand them. I'm going to pull out the things that I think are important for other people. I'm going to share those things. And I think those steps are going to remain no matter how cool AI gets.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I mean, you put it really well. I've been thinking a lot about what kind of use cases work really well with LLMs, with this generation of AI. And I think what you said is bang on. As far as communication goes, it can help me communicate better, but it can't communicate on my behalf, right? So every time somebody tries a use case where they're trying to communicate instead of me, it kind of gets caught very early. There's this whole thing on LinkedIn comments, which were AI generated, and you can catch it like this, right? But can you become a better writer because of AI? Yeah. Can you use it as Grammarly, but even better? Can you do a tone check? I heard a recent use case by someone who I work with every day, and she mentioned that she writes an email and then she asks ChatGPT if it comes across as being rude, because she knows she can sometimes be sarcastic, she can be rude, right? So she wants to make sure that she doesn't come across as a bit of an ass, right? So for that, that's great. But if you ask ChatGPT to write the email, then you're probably going to not do a great job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think humans want to interact with other humans. That's what it comes down to. And that's true for AI. That's true for cybersecurity. That's true for your scan tools and your DevSecOps approach and all of that stuff. It comes down to relationships ultimately.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you have any follow-up questions, Sandesh, but I think this was a great episode overall. Thank you, Dustin, so much.
Yeah, no, this was great. It's also refreshing to talk for so long about. It's been a while since we spoke about the people side of things for so long. So this was great fun for us. A lot of our episodes was a lot about automation and tooling and all that. And I think sometimes we forget that on both sides of the automation there are actual humans, right? So this was a great chat, Dustin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me. I think I'm a tech guy. I'm a tech guy who believes that humans are the way. And I think that's a little bit unique. So that's why I try to get out there and do events like this and just talk to people as much as I can about this stuff.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. If you like the show, please share this with your friends and colleagues. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach Anshuman on Twitter at Anshuman_BH. That's ANSHUMAN_BH. And me, Sandesh, at Jubba on Jeans. That's JUBBAONJEANS. See you next time.